History and fiction sometimes seem so close they are nearly inseparable. Take this photo, for example, which is shrouded in mystery. The photo, labeled simply as Japanese Man in the United States National Archives, was taken just after the successful invasion of the Normandic beaches, D-Day. It depicts an American soldier processing captured POWs, or prisoners of war. The thing that stands out quite a bit is the Asian, presumably Japanese-looking man in a German Wehrmacht uniform. Nowadays it might be more normal to see people of various ethnicities in a single army, but back then it was an odd scene. So much so that the photo got its label, Japanese Man, and was put in the archives. So who was this man and how did he end up in France fighting with the Germans? The story goes he was not Japanese but actually Korean and ended up fighting with the Japanese army in China, the Soviet Red Army in Ukraine, before ending up as a forced conscript defending the Atlantic Wall with the German Wehrmacht before eventually being captured by US troops to live out his days in Illinois, where he died in 1991. So is it history or fiction? This time in history, the peculiar man who fought in 3 different armies during the Second World War. Presumably, the man in the picture was named Yang Kyoungjong. In 1938, Yang was 18 years old when he was forcibly conscripted into the Japanese army. Japan had invaded China in 1932 and installed a puppet government in the region of Manchuria, nowadays northeastern China. This puppet government, fueled by a Japanese desire for more land, was very much disliked by the nearby USSR, which first resulted in border disputes before escalating in all-out warfare at the breakout of the Second World War. Yang, like many other Koreans, was forcibly conscripted into the Imperial Japanese Kwantung Army, its largest and most prestigious division, to fight the Russians around the Japanese-Soviet border near the river Kalka in a battle also referred to as the Battle of Khalkhin Gol. The battle lasted from May until its climactic battle on the 31st of August 1939, involving over 100,000 troops with estimates between 30 and 50,000 casualties. The Japanese eventually lost, and Yang, who survived the battle, was taken as a POW and sent to a Gulag labor camp. The story for the young Korean man did not end there, by far. Forced labor did not last long for Kyoungjong, as he was once again forcibly conscripted, this time into the Soviet Red Army. He was sent to the Soviet Western Front, fighting the Germans at the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. During the Third Battle of Kharkiv, he was presumably captured by the German Wehrmacht. The German Wehrmacht did have a history with foreign conscripts. They had a dedicated unit called Hilfswilliger, also named Hiwis. Hilfswilliger literally translates to help willing, basically meaning auxiliary volunteer. In the beginning, most of these men were assigned to non-combat roles, but as the war advanced, they took on fighting roles as well. Their motivation varied wildly. Some just agreed wholeheartedly with the cause, others mainly joined because they wanted to fight communism. Let me know if you'd like me to dedicate a video on these foreign volunteers for the Germans. Back to Yang. As a foreign conscript, he was sent off to France, where he was to defend the coast at, you guessed it, Normandy, where he was ultimately taken as a POW by the Americans, as his photo suggests. He was sent off to a prisoner camp in Britain before being shipped to one in America. Because the Americans did not want to force any POWs to move back to Soviet territory, he was eventually granted American citizenship, where he lived for the rest of his life. An intriguing story, to say the least. Fighting on 3 different sides in places far away from home, probably taking orders in languages you don't even understand. This story has been making rounds on the internet for over 2 decades, but how much of it is actually true? The photo only tells us its title and description: young Japanese man. No name or details. We're not even sure if the man in the photo is Japanese or Korean, let alone whether it's Yang Kyoungjong. Besides all the internet articles and YouTube videos, 2 sources in favor of this story are the historians Anthony Beevor and Steven Zaloga, who mention Yang in their books but do not provide any source material. A documentary aired in 2005 by the Seoul Broadcasting System pointed out that there is no proof of Kyoungjong's existence at all, let alone for him to be the man in the picture. They were not able to identify the man in this picture at all. It seems that the original source pointed at for this story was an article which ran in the newspaper Weekly Korea in December of 2002. During the research for this video, I was unable to find this article, but feel free to share it in the comment section if you have a link. Lastly, a reference could be made to Stephen Ambrosie's book D-Day, June 6, 1944, The Climactic Battle of World War II. In the book, Stephen Ambrosie, famous for writing books such as Band of Brothers, interviews Lieutenant Brewer from the 506th Parachute Brigade of the 101st Airborne Division. This might be the closest material we have to proof of the story. Here is the excerpt from the book. The so-called East battalions became increasingly unreliable after the German defeat at Kursk. They were, therefore, sent to France in exchange for German troops. At the beach called Yuda on the day of the invasion, Lieutenant Robert Brewer of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division, US Army, captured 4 Asians in Wehrmacht uniforms. No one could speak their language. Eventually, it was learned that they were Koreans. How on earth did Koreans end up fighting for Hitler to defend France against Americans? It seems they had been conscripted into the Japanese Army in 1938. Korea was then a Japanese colony. Captured by the Red Army in the border battles with Japan in 1939, forced into the Red Army, captured by the Wehrmacht in December 1941 outside of Moscow, forced into the German Army, and sent to France. What happened to them, Lieutenant Brewer never found out, but presumably they were sent back to Korea. If so, they would almost certainly have been conscripted again, either into the South or North Korean army. It is possible that in 1950 they ended up fighting once again, either against the US Army or with it, depending on what part of Korea they came from. Such are the vagaries of politics in the 20th century. End of quote. Ultimately, we do not know whether the story of Kyoungjong is true, nor can we precisely say who the man in this picture exactly is. Some sources point out he was not from Korea but rather Mongolian, for example. Theoretically though, the story could have been true, but little sources are available to confirm it. It therefore stays in a spot between fact and fiction. I hope you enjoyed this video, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time in history.